There's a story in the Old Testament that I find profoundly unsettling, perhaps the most disturbing narrative in the entire Bible. It's a passage that has always weighed heavily on my mind. Due to its intense and mature content, it may not be suitable for younger audiences or those who might find it triggering based on past experiences. Before we proceed, please be aware that this discussion might not be appropriate for everyone. The account I'm referring to is found in chapters 19 through 21 of the book of Judges. While many are familiar with chapter 19, they often overlook the continuation in the subsequent chapters. I believe there are several crucial lessons we can learn from this troubling tale. First, I'll recount the story as vividly as possible, and then we'll explore the insights it offers. In a time when Israel had no king, a Levite man resided in a remote area of the hill country of Ephraim. He took a woman from Bethlehem in Judah to be his concubine, or wife, depending on interpretation. She hailed from the southern region of Bethlehem, while he lived in the northern territory. However, the woman was unfaithful to him, and returned to her father's house in Bethlehem, staying there for 4 months. Determined to reconcile, the Levite journeyed from Ephraim to Bethlehem to bring her back. Upon his arrival, her father greeted him warmly. Multiple times, the Levite expressed his intent to leave with his wife, but her father urged him, "Please, stay another night." This generous hospitality extended over several days. Eventually, the Levite decided it was time to depart. Grateful yet resolute, he told his father-in-law, "I appreciate your kindness, but I must return home." So he, his servant, and his concubine set out on their journey back to Ephraim. As they traveled northward, they approached the city of Jebus, later known as Jerusalem. The day was drawing to a close, and the servant suggested, "Let's stop in this city of Jebus and spend the night here." The Levite replied, "We shouldn't stop in a city of foreigners who are not Israelites. Let's continue to Gibeah." The servant proposed, "Let's try to reach Gibeah, or Ramah, and spend the night there." They pressed on, and as the sun set, they arrived in Gibeah, a town belonging to the tribe of Benjamin. Upon entering Gibeah, they found that no one offered them shelter for the night, despite the cultural importance of hospitality in Israel. As evening approached, an old man returned from his work in the fields. Seeing them in the town square, he asked, "Where are you heading? Where have you come from?" They explained their journey and mentioned that no one had offered them lodging. The old man insisted, "You're welcome to stay at my house. Please don't spend the night in the square." The Levite assured him, "We have everything we need, food for our donkeys and provisions for ourselves. We just need a place to rest." The old man replied, "You're welcome to stay with me. I'll provide whatever you need." Grateful for his kindness, they accepted his hospitality. While they were enjoying themselves, some corrupt men from the city surrounded the house. They pounded on the door and shouted to the homeowner, "Bring out the man who came to your house, though we can abuse him." This is where the story takes a dark and disturbing turn. These depraved men of Gibeah demanded to violate the Levite guest. The homeowner stepped outside and pleaded with them, "No, my friends, don't commit such a wicked act. This man is my guest. Don't disgrace yourselves by doing this. Look, here is my virgin daughter and his concubine. I will bring them out to you now, and you can deal with them as you wish. But please, don't commit this outrageous deed against this man." We'll examine this response more deeply later, but what happens next is heartbreaking. The men refused to listen. The Levite took his concubine and sent her outside to them. They subjected her to terrible abuse throughout the night. At dawn, they released her. This is why I cautioned that this discussion might not be suitable for everyone and could be triggering. Imagine the horror this woman endured, mistreated by these men all night long. She suffered immensely at their hands. As morning broke, the woman collapsed at the doorway of the house where her husband was staying, her hands reaching out to the threshold. When her husband rose to continue his journey, he opened the door and found her lying there. He said to her, "Get up, let's go." But there was no response. Realizing she had passed away, he placed her on his donkey and set out for home. What he did next is both shocking and grievous. Upon returning to his house, he took a knife and divided her body into 12 parts. He sent these pieces throughout the territory of Israel. Everyone who saw this was appalled and said, "Nothing like this has ever been seen or done, not since the day the Israelites came up out of Egypt. We must consider it and speak up." Along with each part of his deceased concubine, he likely included a message detailing the atrocity committed by the men of Gibeah, members of the tribe of Benjamin. The other tribes were horrified, declaring that nothing like this had ever happened in their history. The story continues into chapters 20 and 21, and it's important to understand the full context. The tribes of Israel assembled as one to address this grievous act. They confronted the tribe of Benjamin, demanding that the wicked men of Gibeah be handed over for punishment. However, the Benjamites refused to listen to their fellow Israelites. Instead, they gathered their forces to fight against the other tribes. A civil war erupted between the tribe of Benjamin and the rest of Israel, resulting in the loss of thousands of lives on both sides. The initial battles were challenging for the Israelites, but eventually, they overpowered the Benjamites. They destroyed the cities of Benjamin, killing men, women, and children, sparing only a few. Only 600 Benjamite men survived, fleeing into the wilderness to the rock of Rimmon, where they stayed for 4 months. The rest of Israel, realizing the extent of the devastation, began to feel remorse. They mourned the potential loss of one of the 12 tribes, fearing that the tribe of Benjamin might become extinct. In their grief, they recalled that they had taken an oath at Mitzpah, saying, "None of us will give his daughter in marriage to a Benjamite." This oath complicated matters because without wives, the surviving Benjamite men could not rebuild their tribe. The Israelites sought a solution to provide wives for the remaining men without breaking their oath. They discovered that the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead had not come to the assembly at Mitzpah. So they decided to send 12,000 warriors to Jabesh Gilead with orders to kill every male and any woman who was not a virgin. They found 400 young women who had not been with a man and brought them to the camp at Shiloh in Canaan. These women were offered to the surviving Benjamite men. However, there were still 200 men without wives. The Israelites then instructed the Benjamites to go to Shiloh during an annual festival to the Lord. They told them, "Hide in the vineyards and watch. When the young women of Shiloh come out to join in the dances, rush out from the vineyards and each of you seize one of them to be your wife. Then return to the land of Benjamin." This plan allowed the Benjamites to obtain wives without the other Israelites directly giving their daughters to them, thus not breaking their oath. The fathers and brothers of the women were told to be compassionate because the Benjamites needed wives to restore their tribe. These cascading bad decisions highlight how one poor choice can lead to another, affecting countless innocent people. The initial atrocity led to a brutal war, mass killings, and the abduction of women, actions that caused widespread suffering and moral decline. Now, let's reflect on some lessons we can learn from this troubling narrative. Firstly, when there's no accountability in our lives, we're more likely to stray significantly from what is right. The opening line of the story states, "In those days Israel had no king." Without a central authority or leadership, people tended to do as they pleased, ignoring the laws and guidelines meant to govern their behavior. Similarly, when we lack accountability, when there's no one to answer to, we might make decisions we wouldn't otherwise consider. We might think we can act without consequences, leading us down paths we never intended to take. Secondly, we must ensure that we treat every person with dignity, recognizing them as valuable human beings. In the story, the homeowner was willing to sacrifice his own daughter and the Levite's concubine to protect his male guest. This indicates a distorted sense of value, where the lives and dignity of these women were considered less important. We need to recognize the inherent worth of every individual, regardless of gender, status, or relationship to us. By seeing others as valuable and deserving of respect, we prevent ourselves from objectifying or dehumanizing them. Thirdly, the further we distance ourselves from moral guidance, the more vulnerable we become to actions we never imagined we would commit. The Book of Judges illustrates a nation gradually moving away from their foundational values. The events of chapters 19 to 21 are a culmination of this decline, showcasing just how far the people had strayed. When we neglect our principles and ethics, we open ourselves up to influences and choices that can lead us down destructive paths. We might find ourselves involved in situations that, years earlier, we would have vehemently denied possible. Fourthly, every poor choice we make has consequences that we cannot control. While the men of Gibeah committed a heinous act, the response from the other tribes led to further devastation. Innocent people suffered because of collective decisions made in anger and haste. The Israelites' oath not to give their daughters in marriage to the Benjamites led to further unethical actions, such as the slaughter of Jabesh Gilead and the abduction of the women of Shiloh. These actions demonstrate that we can choose our behavior, but we cannot choose the repercussions that follow. One bad decision often leads to another, creating a cycle of negative consequences that affect not only ourselves but also those around us. Lastly, despite the series of tragic events, there is a glimmer of hope and grace even in the midst of our most destructive decisions. The tribe of Benjamin was not completely annihilated. They were given a chance to rebuild and continue. The Book of Judges concludes with everyone returning to their own inheritance. However, the final verse serves as a sobering reminder: in those days Israel had no king, everyone did as they saw fit. This underscores the chaos and moral decline that can occur when people abandon their foundational principles. This story is challenging and uncomfortable, but it's important to confront and learn from it. Every decision we make has the potential to impact not just ourselves but also those around us. The Levites' actions, the townspeople's crimes, and the collective decisions of the Israelite tribes all had far-reaching consequences. Innocent people suffered because of the choices of others. If there's one overarching lesson from this narrative, it's the profound impact our decisions can have on entire communities. We must strive to make choices that uplift and support others, staying true to our deepest values. By maintaining accountability, valuing every person, staying close to our moral compass, and considering the consequences of our actions, we can avoid the pitfalls illustrated in this story. It's also a reminder that even in our darkest moments, there's an opportunity for redemption and rebuilding. The tribe of Benjamin, despite nearly being wiped out, was able to restore itself. This demonstrates that while consequences are inevitable, hope remains possible. Thank you for joining me in this exploration of a difficult but important part of Scripture. I hope it has provided valuable insights and encouraged thoughtful reflection. May we learn from these lessons to make better choices in our own lives. Until next time, take care, and may you be blessed.